All right, peace and greetings, YouTubers. So welcome to another edition of In the News. I would start off by saying Happy New Year, but clearly the year has not started off so happy, huh? Like, what kind of foolishness? Like, look, I'll get to Iran in a minute, but my goodness, listen, if this is how 2020 was going to start off, we might as well hit the rewind button. Like, we don't have to start over because this is not how we going to kick off the year, okay? So as far as I'm concerned, it's still 2019. Today is December 35th. All right, so tell the people up top, we will come into 2020 when they get it right because life is too short for this foolishness that they got going right now. My God, like it's only the fourth day of the year. How? Anyway, what I did want to start off with is that I saw a very interesting article coming from Time Magazine, and I'll post a link in the description. And the article is talking about how the new year was never really a good time for those who were enslaved in America. And I mean, pretty much the entire experience was never good because you were enslaved, but two, it became a very tumultuous time period because this was a time period when those who were enslaved were most likely going to be sold off. This is like when people would most likely lose a family member or a friend or themselves be sold off. And it was because the new year served as a time for people to want to kind of manage any outstanding debt. And so what a lot of people would do who own plantations or those who own slaves were, they would often sell a slave or two to try to balance out whatever it was that they owed. And the saddest aspect was that a lot of times the main ones that they would often sell off would be the older slaves, those who were a bit older. They had lived, they're in their 50s and 60s, and, the body doesn't work the same way anymore. They've done all this hard manual labor since they were born, and, they got the bad knees now, they got the gout, and also those who were enslaved that were disabled would often be sold off too. This slave here, he talked trash 10 years ago, so I cut his hand off, but he works twice as hard, so you won't even notice the difference. So he's just as good as the other one, so why don't you come and try to buy this one? And so oftentimes they would try to sell off, all of those before they had to start selling those who were enslaved that were a bit younger or more able-bodied. And another sad aspect was that sometimes they'd also sell off the really, really, really young kids. If there was like a plantation or a slave owner who was, already much older anyway and didn't really have any kids or anything else to, continue their legacy, a lot of times those who were enslaved that were 2, 3, 4, 5 years old, it was like, well, sell them off because I don't have the energy and time to try to build them and train them up to do what it is I need them to do. So sell them off. So just imagine what it would be like if you were somebody who was enslaved and say you're, 35, 36, and you have to watch your children and your parents be sold off. Absolutely crazy, right? But then the viewpoints of the new year from the perspective of those who were enslaved started to change around 1807, 1808. Mainly because in 1807, the United States decided to ban participating in the transatlantic slave trade. But it wasn't going to kick into effect until 1808. And so at the same time, the UK had also just banned participating in the transatlantic slave trade. So for those who were enslaved, they looked at it as, hey, this is an opportunity where maybe, just maybe, this slavery thing might end. One of the sadder aspects about that time period as well, though, was that between 1807 and 1808, you saw a certain thing happen. So a country like Portugal, who had businesses that were pretty much locked into the Atlantic slave trade, it was something that really helped to build Portugal's economy. They saw this as a money grab because they said, hey, one of our biggest competitors, the UK, is no longer participating in the slave trade because the UK alone had snatched up 3.1 million people and sold them off into the British colonies within the Western Hemisphere. And so Portugal saw that as, hey, well, this is pretty much how we build our economy, so let's double up. So you saw an increase in the amount of traffic of those that were being, brought across the Atlantic Ocean. They had to double up. That's probably why Portugal had the largest amount of people who were enslaved that they sold off. They sold off 5.8 million people. There's a reason why. Like, it's kind of like they doubled up. And this wasn't all just between 1807 and 1808. It was in the few years leading up to it as well because the conversations about the transatlantic slave trade starting to go into demise were already coming up. And so a place like Portugal, they used it as a money grab and just went for it. But one of the also interesting parts about the whole ban on the Atlantic slave trade was that it wasn't even really followed all the way through. Like, even in the United States, there were still records of ships coming into the United States up until 1859. And, folks just get off the ship, start lying like, oh, no, these aren't slaves. No, we're not doing no trading. No, this is a cruise line. This is a cruise ship. They said they wanted to see the America. So I brought them on over. Y'all come on, get on off. Final destination. We put them in chains. It was like the seatbelt on the ship. Got to keep them safe. We hit some tumultuous water on occasion. And so for those who were enslaved, that time period after 1807, 1808 started to serve as a celebration on New Year's because for them they felt, well, if the transatlantic slave trade can end, maybe slavery just might end. But those celebrations were short-lived, because what ended up happening is that same time period started to become even more violent, because the domestic slave trade was already intense. The domestic slave trade was already extremely violent. And you saw a lot of crazy acts also happening. And also in this time period, you started to see those who were enslaved start to get their freedom in some of the northern states, in certain portions of the states. Because some states, even though they abolished slavery, it didn't just be like an overnight thing, like boom, everybody's free on Tuesday, let's go. Sometimes the states would do it in phases. And so one of the things you also saw was people also stole slaves. So even people who didn't own slaves were selling slaves. What would they do? They would go and capture and steal different slaves from different plantations and resell them. That was one of the effects of the ban on the Atlantic slave trade. And so there was a little bit more violence. And that's one of the reasons why you often see people would be branded, because those who own slaves would often try to brand those, as a sign of their property. That branding that you see them do with like the animals, where it's the hot metal and they, and so if there was a dispute where it's like, hey, I believe you stole what was mine, all you had to do was look for that brand and, yep, that's mine, give it back. And then it was handled in the court. And so it was a very, very great time period. So the celebrations didn't last very long. And as a matter of fact, in 1827, that's when you saw some of the worst violence. In New York, there was this really bad attack on this black church by a white mob. And that ties into the fact that New York had literally just banned slavery throughout the entire state. The final effects of that ban finally started to kick in, because New York was a unique state where slavery was abolished technically in 1799, but it didn't kick all the way in until 1827, because they did theirs in phases. So in 1799, they had this law that stated, well, if you were born after 1799 to a parent who was enslaved, because we know in the United States, slavery also tied into lineage. If your parents were slaves, you were going to be one, and everybody in your family was going to be one until slavery ended. So the law was in 1799, if you were born to the parents of those who were enslaved, you were not a slave. However, you were an indentured servant, and you still had to work for whoever owned your parents. But when you turn 24, 25, 26, you hit your mid-20s, then you could be free. So, you get to be free, but your mom still has to be on the plantation. Your mom still has to be the slave. Your dad has to still be the slave. Grandma, if she's still alive, she's still over there working, and you watching from the fence on the side, even though you really don't know what your livelihood is going to be, because all you know is slavery. So a lot of times, those who were enslaved still work for the people that enslaved them, even when they got free. And so anyway, that's the first law. Then in 1817, New York decides, okay, well, those who were born before 1799, I guess we can free y'all too, since y'all over here complaining. And so that's when they started the gradual phase of freeing those born before 1799. But that didn't kick in across the entire state until 1827, the same year where you saw that attack on the black church on New Year's. And so pretty much that was the result of a lot of white Americans at the time angry because their livelihood had ended. For those who depended on slavery, even if people, like, one of the things I want to say, a lot of times when we talk slavery, we have to be honest. Most white Americans did not own slaves. Most white Americans couldn't afford slaves, but they were employed by those who owned slaves. Sometimes the businesses that they had were dependent upon the labor that was brought in from slaves, and that played a role into their revenue. So even small business owners or people who were day laborers, sometimes their very work was dependent upon the existence of slavery. So you saw a lot of white people living hot, and so they go and they attack this church of black folks who happened to be free, who were celebrating the New Year, and boom, there we go. So overall, the viewpoints of the New Year kind of, it varies depending on what your experience is and what you've learned in history and how you see the world. So for those who were enslaved, the New Year was not always a great time. Now, all of that was not in the Time article. Of course, I had to go out on the side and go look up some more research just to kind of, I guess, dig into the points that they were putting out there. But it's a really interesting article, so definitely check it out when you get a chance. And it's crazy because I feel like that story ties into our next story. It just goes to show how there's always a cycle and how things can often work, because when you look at like that story, or you just look at that was just, I just gave a brief synopsis of New York and a few other things, but how everything kind of tied and repeated and looped in a circle. And now you're looking at what's happening in the world today as far as this foolishness with Iran, and boom, it's like you're seeing a cycle of something we just literally watched happen 20 years ago. And as far as this foolishness with Iran, I'll say this. The U.S. will always find its way into some BS and drag the people into it every single time. I think that's the worst part about war. Like, when you're talking about any kind of war activity or even rumors of war, like, literally, it's the world leaders that don't get along. And the people who just live under these governments, even if they don't agree with the government, they end up becoming collateral to the decisions of that government. I think that's the most triggering thing about, in my opinion, being an American, is that we always, not we, because really I didn't vote for none of this foolishness, and really, like, again, most of the people I feel really are not supporting this at the moment, but the people always get dragged into stuff that they have nothing to do with. Like the idea of war, the fact that you'll send troops over and vice versa to go fight some people they've never even met, mainly because the people in that country have also been told that the people in the other country are terrible, and you got two groups of people who don't know each other who go and they strive to kill each other because the people up top told them to go and do it. That's literally how war operates. But as far as this entire situation, I'm just like, are we going through this cycle again? And I think the worst part is like you saw exactly what happened. They did that foolishness, and then next thing you know, here comes the PR move, and they pushed that story about that Soleimani was planning to do some terrorist attacks and something, and it was going to compromise our American freedom and so on and so forth. And then that starts the cycle. The cycle begins. It's a repeat of 2003 all over again. And I think for me, it's kind of like, if we want to really be honest, had the United States never gone in the Middle East years ago, we wouldn't be in the predicaments that we're in now. You know, when they're always talking about, destabilizing the Middle East and we got to be over there to stabilize it. I'm like, yeah, when you go and you bomb 33 different countries in 50, 60, 70 years, of course, that's the end result that you get. You go in and you corrupted so many nations and taken out so many world leaders and bombed so many people and started wars and everything. And can we be honest? I've said this a million times on my channel. Literally every war that we've jumped into after the Civil and Revolutionary War had nothing to do with American freedom. Every single war had some kind of special interest. That also includes any operation. Most of them had some kind of special interest where, in the end result, the United States would come into money. That's why when you're talking about Iran right now, Iran had just announced a few months ago that they found an additional 53 billion barrels of oil. What a coincidence. Because, of course, that 53 billion barrels would equate to about a third of what they have right now in their reserves. So for Iran, that's a big come up financially, especially in an era where they have all these sanctions against them because, of course, Orange Man up top went and he canceled the Iran deal because he thought it was stupid. Even though I thought at least with the Iran deal, people slept a little bit better, because when you talk about the conversation between the United States and Iran, it's kind of like the U.S. is like, listen, we know we're a little crazy and we can pop off if we want to. And we know y'all are a little crazy and y'all can pop up if you want to. So you know what? We see each other. Let's somehow peacefully coexist and just mind our own business for a little bit of time. Let's just buy us some time. We'll get back to the conflict later, but let's just buy ourselves some time and figure this crap out. But, Orange Man went and seam ripped all that and talked all this trash and gave them all these different sanctions. And so literally he reignited the flame. And so when you just talk about the fact that how this looks to me, it's kind of like the idea of diplomacy is just not there. I'm like, I don't really know a whole lot about Soleimani and whatever he had going, because the Pentagon said he was threatening to, he was going to do all this, and then the troops and stuff that live in the area were in danger. Okay, my issue is the element of diplomacy doesn't exist. They just go from one extreme to the other. There's never a middle ground. There's never anything that could possibly make sense. They just go straight to the most extreme thing you can do. It's kind of like, say you have a birthday party, and you're supposed to blow out your candle. They got the nice little candle. Everybody's standing around the circle singing, and, got the little hats and the streamers, and the dog is wagging the tail on the side and everything. It's a sunny, bright day. And so you're supposed to blow out your candle. Make your wish, blow out your candle. Instead, you get this big old bucket of water and dump it right on the cake. And, the water splashes, hits everybody. Everybody's wet. The cake is ruined. Nobody gets to eat the cake. People got water and frosting all on them. The dog's licking grandma's leg because he got frosting on and everything. And then when everybody's looking at you like you're stupid, your response is, oh, well, the candle had a flame on it. I had to put the flame out. So rather than just using some common sense and blowing the candle out, you put a big old bucket of water and splashed everything and ruined it for everybody. That's literally how I look at war, and that's how I look at how the U.S. has handled a lot of the foreign issues that we've had as far as, things specifically in the Middle East. We always just go to the biggest extreme every single time. Like, did anybody think about the long-term effects of what that would mean? And then your crazy president goes and it tweets a picture of the American flag right after he does it. I was like, at least in the past, when America used to do really terrible things to other world leaders, we would act like we didn't know what happened. We would go in and how we went and we destroyed, or pretty much destroyed, the government in Argentina, and how we did some of the things in Panama. We would sometimes be like, oh, well, we don't know what y'all talking about. No idea. Oh, that's terrible. But, thoughts and prayers. Now it's like, yeah, we did it. What's up, America? And so I'm just like, I can't. I was like, man, are we really starting the year off like this? So now you're getting ready to witness that same cycle happen again, as it usually does anytime we jump into something, because the narrative, it already goes. Anytime the United States wants to get into something, you got to get the American people on your side. How do you do that? you instill the fear of God in them and make them so terrified of whoever this person is or this country is that we would have to go and stop them before they get us. That's the narrative they put out there. And so when you go back to like 2002, 2003 and how we jumped into the Iraq War, if you go back to that time period, a lot of people in America were still shook from 9/11, terrified. They had never seen anything like that before. It was unheard of that something like a 9/11 could happen in this country. That was probably the worst thing people witnessed since the Oklahoma City bombing. And so people were afraid of that. You had the anthrax thing taking place. It was just, America was really antsy. You had the whole terror alert threat system with the red, orange, yellow, blue, green little system where it would let you know the probability of a terrorist attack happening that day. So people were afraid of going to sporting events and everything like that. Your experience at the airport was even different. The days of you walking right off the plane and your family standing there with the balloons and the flowers and welcome home, those days were over. Now your family had to meet you at baggage claim. And if you had a father like mine, he didn't even do that. He didn't even get out the car. He just drove in a circle, and you had to pray that you could catch him while he got to that circle, because if you got outside and he had just drove past, you was going to wait another 5 minutes for him to come around. So times had just changed for a lot of people. And so they start airing these ads because, one, Americans already were in Afghanistan and they weren't really fond of jumping into any more wars. There's some people who are always going to be pro-war no matter what, but a lot of people were like, we really don't want anything to do with this. And somehow, it doesn't make sense that y'all are saying Saddam Hussein is a threat to America. It didn't really add up because Saddam Hussein, in the eyes of a lot of Americans, had nothing to do with 9/11. And so you start seeing these ads. You see these ads and you see kind of like, I don't want to use the word propaganda, but like a propaganda stuff put out where they start saying, okay, he has these weapons of mass destruction that he's going to use on us. And then these ads start playing. And these were some really unique ads because they always do this thing. And they do it today even when it's nothing to do with war, even if it's just politics. They get that ad where you have the white woman with the really soft voice who starts talking. And so the purpose of getting her to talk extremely soft is it's supposed to somehow humanize whatever atrocities or foolishness these politicians want to jump into. And it also appeals to the senior citizen demographic. It appeals to women. It appeals to people who are very passionate about love. And it really appeals to people who are evangelicals and everything like that. And so the ad starts playing. And the ad I remember seeing right before the war started. And this ad was presented from the perspective of people who would have lived in Iraq at the time. And so you see this ad and you just hear the woman's voice. And it's, oh, he's a terrorist. He's killing our children. We're not safe. Please, America, help us. Call your local congressman today and tell them to support George Bush because our children need it. And the children of the world need to say, they said some crap about, pretty much they just wanted people to get in support of George Bush with what he wanted to do with Iraq. And people jumped on it. And then it was so crazy because there were so many narratives. So it was like weapons of mass destruction. And, now he had something to do with 9/11 and he knew about Osama bin Laden. And then on top of that, people were like, oh, well, he tried to kill George Bush's dad. I was like, well, let them two square up and handle that. That ain't got nothing to do with me. And so, we jump into the war in Iraq, and then here we go, round 2, round 3. And so you're seeing the same thing. And it's so funny because when they do these scare tactics, they really get into the mindsets of a lot of Americans who live in fear. It's so funny. Every time I go, I have a friend that lives like in Warsaw, Virginia, which is kind of like in the middle of nowhere. And so every time we would go down to Warsaw, we always see this big old giant sign. It said like ISIS is coming. Look out for Al Qaeda. Watch out for the terrorists. And I'm kind of like, no disrespect to you guys out here. I don't even get cell phone service out here. I don't think y'all have to worry about anybody blowing up anything out here. There's literally nothing out here but a cornfield and like a corner store. I think y'all gonna be all right. If they want to drop these multi-million-dollar bombs, they're probably gonna hit a target that actually they can at least get the benefit of their dollar from. That's all I'm saying. No disrespect to those who live in the more rural areas. But so they get all those people on board, and then next thing you know, it's almost like people become so blindly patriotic that they will support any and every element of foolishness, all in the name of freedom. And so I think that's the part that kind of makes it a little just man. And then bad timing, Mr. President, because it's like on top of that, the president has burned literally every bridge with every ally we have. Literally. You done pissed off everybody in NATO. You done cussed out all of NATO because you said, well, they not paying enough and this one's not paying enough. So if you're not paying enough, America's not going to help y'all when y'all get in trouble, and F you, and this is not going to happen. You just all of that. You done pissed off Canada. You even somehow pissed off Australia. They were just minding their business, trying to take care of the fires that they got in their country at the moment. You done pissed off Australia. So even the people with the koalas and the kangaroos ain't rocking with us at the moment. And so on the flip side, you go after Iran, a country that's also buddy-buddy with North Korea, China, and Russia. I said, of all the timing, why? Make it make sense. Make it make sense. I'm trying to see like what is the long-term goal with this, because all I see is chaos in the future. I don't see this being handled in a diplomatic way, especially when you have too many people in charge who just aren't reasonable. And then you send Mitch McConnell, of all people, to go and speak on behalf of America and explain to America what happened. And of course, he's fueling the fire. And I'm like, you know what? This is what gets me. You have all these leaders up top who will go and stir the pot, but they're not going to go out on the front lines. Even the people who talk the most trash, like these political pundits and stuff, and people, you know, who have national platforms like the Tommy Laurens and all of them, they will talk all that trash, but I guarantee you, when it's time for war, they are silent. I'm like, you know what? All of y'all go over there and fight. Since this is what y'all wanted and y'all are so gung-ho about supporting this foolishness, y'all go over there and fight. Tommy Laurens, she need to be up there, you know, ready for duty, sir. She can go up there. Mitch McConnell, he can go up there too. Since he always wants to stir up the pot, you go over there and fight, okay? Plus, I don't trust people who have no bone structure in their face. So send him over there. Trump, he can go fight too, because he done told y'all he's so strong and he knows everything. You know, he just, like, even again, the part that just still gets me, that I would never let go of, is just the fact that, you know, they're saying it's his intelligence. The intelligence told them about all this. And I'm like, now you trust the intelligence? You didn't even trust the intelligence when they're talking about the Russia meddling in the election and everything else. And I know more than the CIA and FBI, and I know everything. Everybody's stupid. Nobody knows more than me. Okay, Mr. Know-It-All, you go over there and fight. You got it, because I trust you to protect us. Go, somebody send Air Force One over there. He got it. You know, and send his kid, Donald and Eric. Them two can go over there too, because they talk a lot of trash too. All of them go over there and fight. Like, I just hate it, because the other thing I keep thinking about is, you just had an entire generation of 17-year-olds that literally all just signed up for the military. Maybe because they wanted to get their school paid for, or maybe because there may not be any other major options for them to get out of whatever financial situation that they're in. So they sign up for the military with the hopes of somehow being financially stable. And it's like, well, gee, great timing. Now look at the mess you're about to get sucked into. And it sucks. Because again, with war, again, you have people signing on, willing to go and kill other people just so they can make their rent. That sounds so backwards to me. No disrespect to those who fight for the country, but it's just like, man, we're just doing this whole humanity thing wrong. We got it wrong. Not we, but, you know, the folks just doing all that. And I think the other bit is that, like, you know, again, when you just look at the history of how we've done things, I don't know if I already said it already, but again, we're a country that has bombed 33 different countries since 1950. 33. I don't think we get to lead the conversation about who has morals in this world and who doesn't. Like, we haven't led by example. And so I can't do it. And then I think for the people who are so gung-ho about getting over there and we need to fight. Yeah, that's right, America. I'm just like, I don't think we understand the privilege that we have as Americans who live here. Because one, we've never experienced a war on the home front. I mean, if you were old enough to experience Pearl Harbor, that was a random attack. Or maybe you just remember 9/11. But the idea of an actual war being fought on your turf, we've never had to experience that. That's why, like, I look at like a country like Iraq, and I feel bad for all the people in that region, even the U.S. troops in that region. You've put all of those troops in danger, you know, because, and I think, let me see, I forgot how many are in different areas, but I think in Europe we have about 36,000 troops in Europe, and then you have a few thousand troops sprinkled in some of the countries around Northern Africa and in the Middle East. If they ever decide to do any kind of all-out assault, we don't even have the numbers to protect those troops that are over there. Plus the civilians that live over in those regions that are doing government contracting and everything else like that. You've put all those people in danger because of ego and pride. And I think that's some foolishness. But going back to my argument, like even with Iraq, what I feel bad about is, you know, because Iraq literally has no say-so in anything, because one, they don't really have a military. We've just destroyed everything that they have. Iraq is always collateral to whatever we do. The fact that we can just launch a drone strike by their airport, like, huh? You know, folks trying to go fly and go see whatever relatives, and oh, well, my flight got delayed, y'all, I'm going to be late. Yeah, they shot off another bomb at the airport. Like, stuff like that is an experience that we as Americans don't have to live with. We get to go to sleep knowing every night there's probably not going to be a chance of a bomb going off outside of our house. You know, we don't get the experience of troops that come in, they pretty much take over your country, and they're sequestered in and quarantined and different things. It's, you know, it's not like you got your 6-year-old and they were supposed to have their birthday party at Chuck E. Cheese, but y'all can't go no more because somebody blew it up yesterday. And so you're gonna just do a little cookout in the backyard. You know, that's not our experience. There's no experience of, you know, some random troops from another country came and they took over the grocery store, and so now we don't have a way to go and get food. But fortunately, we got these neighbors that have been paranoid about the apocalypse since the 1970s. So they got a bunker, and, you know, they had a few potato seeds. So, you know, we gonna grow some potatoes in the front yard, but, you know, hopefully nobody comes and steal them because, you know, we got raccoons outside. Like, it's just, that's not our experience. And I think another thing to think about is just even with the children who've been affected by all this, there are people all around the world who have never known a world without violence. As Americans, we experience and see that, but not on a structural level where it's being endorsed by the government where they're blowing up and shooting up everything every 5 minutes. You have kids that have grown up in places like Syria and Iraq and Afghanistan, where all they've ever known are explosions. All they've ever known is they gotta constantly watch their back. They've only known violence. And I'm like, these children grow up to be vengeful adults, and they remember how society treated them. And they don't let stuff like that go. And a lot of those children are adults now. And so y'all are so worried about Soleimani or whoever. You need to be worried about a lot of these people who have an extremely terrible perception of the United States and want the United States obliterated off the map. That's one of the worst parts about all of it, is like, we have just burned so many bridges and done so many atrocities in the last, however many decades, that we constantly have to keep building up our military to protect ourselves, because now we know that the minute we let our guard down, it's on and popping. It's just, I say, like, the United States, in my opinion, has always been like that bully in the neighborhood. Nobody fights them because they just have enough, they got the hand, so nobody wants to fight them. But if they ever get caught off guard and everybody decides to up and gang up on them, then it's on and popping. And that's why I'm like, I think they need to really think and be strategic about all of this, because it's a very shaky ground when you're talking about that whole idea of North Korea, Russia, China, and Iran on the same team. Especially if we burn the bridges with NATO, and half the countries in NATO are like, we don't want nothing to do with this. UK is already like, don't include us, we're not in it. Plus, you people in the UK are still mad about the war in Iraq. Like, that's what got Tony Blair out of there. The people were pissed off. Like, you got us into that crap. And so, the way that things are set up, the last thing you'd want to be in as far as a scenario is you have no allies on your side, and you got 4 really big countries that want to fight you. You're on your own. And a place like North Korea has been waiting for this opportunity. The reason I felt like they've never attacked the United States is because they know the United States has too much support, which is why they'll always just go and mess with South Korea instead. But in the event that they recognize that if they were to attack the United States, they had the backing of Russia, China, and Iran, they say, okay, well, let's go ahead and light this off. I've been starving my people for 20 years building these weapons. I finally get to use them. Let's get it. So I just think it's all terrible. Hopefully this all can end in a more positive note. Please, rest of the world, know that Americans are not supporting this foolishness. We just got somebody stupid in office, and stupid supporters, and some stupid people in Congress that also endorse it, and a few stupid people that live here that support it. But listen, if y'all got a beef with you, take it up with them. Please leave me and mine alone. That's all I'm saying. All right, switching gears here. I did want to talk about Ari Lennox and Teyana Taylor for a brief moment, because a lot of you were asking me my 2 cents on that one. Long story short, there was an individual who made a tweet, and the tweet said, Ari Lennox and Teyana Taylor's ability to have dangerously high sex appeal while simultaneously looking like Rottweilers will always amaze me. And so that tweet is made. Ari Lennox responds and says something about, like, you guys just hate blackness so bad. And it just stirs into this big pot of chaos and arguments. And, all of them are trending for like a day and a half. And pretty much the conversation was like, black women are constantly under attack for their looks and everything like that. And so then there were a lot of responses. And one of the responses, which is going to be the piece I respond to on this video, there was a response where it was like, wait a minute, there's a double standard, because literally there was just a post the other day that said, like, black men when they look like pit bulls. It was this woman who made a post, and pretty much she was saying how she found it sexy when like black men look like pit bulls, and she posted like a picture of like 4 different black dudes who to her resembled a pit bull. And so they're saying that's a double standard. Why is it that you can gas up black men looking like pit bulls, but when a black woman is compared to a Rottweiler, all of a sudden it's anti-black woman, and so on and so forth. And so people had all these arguments. Here's my 2 cents. I think what people should consider is you also have to look at context and history. With everything that we do as a society, the history and the origins of whatever happened before always play a role into how people see things today. So going back to the idea of what Ari Lennox was pissed off about, when you have the conversation around femininity and masculinity, then there's some subtle differences. So even when you have the same comparison, there's going to be a different response. For the response that the girl had about the black men and the pit bulls, I'll say this. For a lot of black men, it's not insulting to be compared to an animal that's deemed strong, aside from anything related to a monkey, because that part is more so racist. But the idea of like the heart of a lion or ferocious as a bear or a pit bull, everything like that, all of that plays into like a male ego as far as the idea of symbolizing strength. So a lot of men would not take offense to that, as opposed to something like a Rottweiler. But even going back to that, where they would take offense would be if you compared them to a certain animal that was deemed as weak. So you compared them to like, I don't know, a hummingbird. They'd be pissed. What? Any kind of animal that's seen as agile or something very soft, like a light feathered crane or something like that, that would piss off a lot of black men. Even if you call them a puppy and bring them down to boyish stage, it pisses them off. So in that aspect, the idea of being compared to something like a pit bull is supposed to symbolize the idea of strength and dominance and having an alpha personality, which for a lot of men and also like a lot of black men, that's what's deemed as attractive in their aspect as far as what makes a black man attractive is the idea of being strong, or the idea of being an alpha male, or the idea of just seeming to really be in control of whatever environment or situation that you're in. So when you think of a pit bull, or you think of a lion, or you think of a bear, those are the animals that kind of call the shots. In comparison, when you're talking about a black woman and saying, okay, well, the whole Rottweiler bit, I think you have to go back to the fact that black women have never been seen as human until recently. Historically, black women have always just been objectified as sex beings. So even in the tweet, he even, like, how, and his tweet even endorses it, where he says, you know, their ability to have dangerously high sex appeal while simultaneously looking like Rottweilers. And to me, that's just saying, okay, they're sexy, but they're ugly. So they're ugly, but I'll still sleep with them. You know, that's pretty much, that's America's history. So when you're talking about, and I don't think either woman is ugly, by the way. You talk about the history of just America in general. When you talk about all these black women, especially during slavery, who were, and even Jim Crow, and even the sharecropping era, these black women who were raped and everything else like that by white men, a lot of times, the women were not even valued as human beings. It was just their body parts, because they were well endowed, because they had breasts, because they had thighs, because they had hips, because they had a butt. All of that. As sexual beings, that's all they were seen as. They were only seen as sexual beings. They couldn't be human. They couldn't have feelings. They seemed to just have this super strength, but they were these super sexual beings. In comparison to when you really go back to the days of slavery, like I said, sex was not always something that was celebrated during that time period, especially with white women, because the idea, and we've talked about this so many times on this channel, but the idea of the white woman, especially in the 16, 17, 1800s, was white women were supposed to be virtuous. They were supposed to be godlike. They, you know, sex was not going to be this big hoopla and everything like that. She wasn't going to be doing too much in the bedroom. Just do just enough and get it on over with, and we have some kids and leave me alone, kind of. That was also what was pushed out there. White women that did enjoy sex were considered harlots and considered, you know, tainted goods and no good. So they weren't viewed as women who were desirable. And so when white men wanted to get that fix, when they wanted to get, you know, whatever fantasies they had, when they wanted to live it out, where did they go? They went to the black women, who often were enslaved, who were also in positions of servitude. And even though they didn't see them as human, they saw them as beings that they could get everything that they wanted from. And so with black women today, when you make those comparisons, and like how you can compare them to an animal but still talk about their sex appeal, it literally endorses those same viewpoints that existed 100, 200 years ago. And so also when you're talking about the idea of animals, the whole bit with a Rottweiler is not considered or seen as something that would be beautiful as far as femininity and beauty. I mean, I like Rottweilers. I think they're nice dogs. But, you know, from the idea of attraction and everything like that, Rottweilers would not be seen as that. I think had she been compared to an animal that would be deemed as graceful or something else like that, people wouldn't have flipped out. But he utilized that idea of the Rottweiler as pretty much an attack on her appearance, but then also justifying his attraction to them sexually. But just, it's almost like, remember Scary Movie 2? With Marlon Wayans' character, that lady, like, it shows the shot is like this body. You see it going up, and everything looks right until you get to her face, and she looked crazy, so he put a bag on her head and still slept with her. Same kind of conversation. So somebody like Ari Lennox, too, I think she went to Howard, so I'm sure she sat in a few history classes. So for how she would most likely see the world, like, she may not have seen that tweet the same way he thought he was putting it out there, but for her, I understand why she'd be offended. And then for so many people to go and, like, attack her for getting mad about it and calling it out, it's like, man, it's funny how people see the world through so many lenses. But again, that's a conversation of femininity and masculinity. You know, for a woman to be compared to an animal, let alone a black woman, it just ties into something that's already been historically embedded in how we think already in comparison to black men. I'm not trying to make this a black man versus black woman argument, because at the end of the day, we gonna need each other always, because everybody else is against it. So there's no time for us to be trying to divide ourselves and go from there. I just think we also have to look into deeper context when we start having some of these conversations. So that's my 2 cents on that. Side note, for those who may have noticed that the lighting just changed, just know I got a phone call in the middle of me taping this video, so I had to stop and come back to the video like 2-3 hours later. And of course the sun is going down now, so that's all that happened. You're not losing your mind. Anyway, so we also learned that Nick Gordon passed away from an alleged drug overdose recently. If you remember, Nick Gordon was a young man that Whitney Houston took in like an adoptive son and helped to raise during his teenage years. And it's kind of sad. It's a horrible way to bring in a new year, unfortunately, for his family. But, you know, it just continues in that weird cycle of that triangle surrounding the death of Whitney Houston and everything that came afterwards. Like, just the fact that now Whitney's gone, Bobby Christina's gone, and Nick Gordon is gone. And so there's going to be questions that will never be answered. In my opinion, I feel like everything surrounding the death of Whitney Houston and even Bobby Christina, there's things we'll just never get the answer to. It's almost kind of like when you look at like the death of Biggie and Tupac, how there's always going to be people who believe they have insider. There's always going to be people who give new details every few years about everything. But overall, the stuff probably just will never really be solved, which makes it sad. As far as Nick Gordon, I always felt that in the later years he got exploited. I'll always remember seeing him on the Dr. Phil show, and I thought that was such a horrible idea to put him on that show because clearly he wasn't together right here. He had a lot going on mentally, and I think sometimes when you have those shows and they put people on when they're not at their best, it's just not good in my opinion. That's why I'm not really a big fan of certain shows like that. Even though it makes entertaining television, you end up feeling bad for the people that are on there. Like, how can you possibly heal people if their healing process is broadcast for the whole world to see? Same thing about when they had Orlando Brown on there. That's the guy from That's So Raven who's been on his own little journey, and he was on the Dr. Phil show too, and clearly he had something going on as well. Like, man, just, I don't know. If you saw that Nick Gordon episode, it was the most uncomfortable thing to kind of sit through because he wasn't even able to like focus and stay centered on the conversation because his mind just went everywhere. And so I don't know, we'll see as the stories around that unfold, but it's all really sad. That entire Whitney Houston triangle is just sad to witness and follow anyway. But condolences to the family. If you remember, we've talked about the young lady Kenneka Jenkins for a few videos in the past. If you remember, she was the young lady that was from the Chicago area. She was at a hotel party. She disappeared, and they found her dead inside of a freezer at that hotel in the basement. And so there was a lot of speculation about what happened and how she ended up dying. And people, the family wanted to open an investigation, and there were lots of rumors and hearsay and all kinds of conversations. And then we kind of saw the story kind of fade and fizzle out. But MTV has decided that they're actually launching a new edition of their True Life series. Only this specific series or this set of episodes will be dealing with a bunch of different crimes that were, I guess, really popular or, kind of like a mystery over the past few years. So on January 8th, they're actually going to be airing an episode about Kenneka Jenkins. And so for those of you who are interested, I'd definitely say check it out. I have no insight about what's on the episode. So I'm wondering if there will be new information that maybe we didn't receive before, or if it's just going to be a rehashing of everything that's already pretty much public knowledge, but we'll see. So there's that. I want to close on a more positive note because Lord, this video has had some heavy stuff on it. The first thing is, I know a lot of you always keep asking about the books behind me, and I always, like, if I get a chance to respond, I always say, hey, check out your questions, my answers video. I normally talk about the videos in that, or I say, check out one of the live videos. We talked about a few of them, but in the last live video, I did say what I was going to do was I was going to pretty much post a Dropbox link to all of the books behind me. And so I've done that. So if you look in the description, every single book I'm sitting in front of, in addition to some other books that I recommend reading, are all in that Dropbox link. All you got to do is click it. You don't got to download nothing. You don't got to do nothing. Just click and it will give you all the books and the titles. Speaking of books and titles, I'm actually reading 2 books. So if anybody is interested in catching up on those books, I'm going to talk about them a little bit on my next live video, or maybe like 2 live videos after this one. The 2 books I'm reading, of course, I'm reading Ta-Nehisi Coates' The Water Dancer, but the other one is actually an interesting one. It's called The Story of Motown, and it's by Peter Benjamin's son. And so right now I'm still finishing the Motown one. One of the cool things I learned just in reading that was that Marvin Gaye was never initially signed to Motown by Berry Gordy. He was already signed to another label, and when Motown pretty much acquired that label, Marvin Gaye and a few other acts ended up on the Motown roster. That may explain why Marvin and Berry, they butt heads a few times when it came to creative control, because Motown already had their own machine where, they had their team of songwriters. Their goal was, let's get as many top 10 hits as we can. Just let us do it. All you need to do is go in there and sing. And then you had other artists who were like, no, I want to write about this and I want to write about that and I want to talk politics and I want to talk race. And, so they were here for a little bit, but Berry caved and said, all right, go and make a little album. And so Marvin gives us What's Going On, which is a great project. It has Inner City Blues on it and Holy Holy, even though I actually like Aretha's version of the song a lot more, but it has Mercy Mercy and What's Going On, of course, and there's some really great songs in that album. So it's kind of cool to see how things come into fruition. And then with the success of Marvin, that's how Stevie was also able to get more creative control with his projects. It's kind of cool. So that's been a really great read. But I'm reading those 2 books as far as Ta-Nehisi Coates' The Water Dancer and The Story of Motown. And then I guess maybe 2 lives from now we can talk about the book for those who want to get into it. But yeah, like I was saying, all of these books here will be in the description. If you scroll all the way down to the very, very, very bottom of all the descriptions. It's funny because soon, like, my description page is going to be like a whole essay because there's so much stuff on there. It's like, oh, check out the podcast and check out the album. And then the Flint Water Crisis, this is where you can go to support. And then we want a Phyllis Hyman biopic, and this is my Instagram. I'm like, man, that thing keeps getting longer. The last thing I did want to close on, which I thought was cool, for those of you who are really big music heads, there's this person, I follow on Twitter. His name is like DJ R-Tistic. That this link will also be in the description. One of the cool things he did to close out 2019 was he made a thread and he pretty much did like a DJ mashup of like the 25 biggest songs of each year as far as club songs in, you know, from 2010 to 2019. It's a really cool set of videos. So if you kind of scroll down, if you're really into like hip hop and everything like that, and you really just enjoy music, he did a really great job doing and covering each year. I thought it was really cool. So definitely check that out. Anyway, now I'm off to go and edit this video so you can actually watch it. So yeah, definitely share your 2 cents. I really do hope that our 2020 finishes a lot better than it started so far. I'm a little nervous. I'm not gonna lie. I need all of that Middle East foolishness that we done got ourselves into to kind of blow over, and we need to get back into a place of peace and tranquility. Anyway, I'm out. Subscribe.